What's any just nugget bomb piece of advice you want to share with the audience?
One of my favorites, this is hands down one of the quotes that impacted me the most. Nietzsche, those who were seen dancing were thought to be insane by those who could not hear the music. Because I know a lot of entrepreneurs and I know a lot of creatives, to your exact point, do get impatient. And it's hard to feel confident about something that's not there. And no one puts their arm around you and says, hey, that idea is so awesome. Like, it's definitely, like, no one knows, no one cares. Everyone's living their own life. And so to understand that it's not crazy to see something that isn't there. It is how things are made and brought to life. And so take pride in the fact that you are a maker and a doer and bringing it to life, making it happen.
Eddie P, good to see you, man. Thanks for coming on.
Hey, good to be here, man. Thanks for
appreciate
having me.
it a lot. Eddie, you are changing the lives of millions of people through your content that you create. It's even changed my life since I started spending time listening to it. Why do you do what you do?
Oh man. Well, first of all, thank you for saying that. That's the reason that I do it, right? There's a joy in giving to the world what you needed most, you know? And I think one of the reasons that the work I do resonates with the people that watch it is because it is pulled right from my journey and my story and the highs and lows we go through. Like, it never ceases to amaze me. You take any category of person, you take an entrepreneur, an athlete, a teacher, a mother, whatever, different context, but same trials and tribulations. And so I love observing, pinpointing, you know, the times I won, the times I lost, right? The highs, the lows, times I got my ass kicked, whatever it is, and dissecting it and saying, hey, here's how this changed my life. Here's what I would have done differently. And, you know, here, maybe you can take something from this in your life. And to me, to be that story for folks is such a cool thing. You know, there's the idea like that, the sort of blend of, you know, what you love and what adds value to the world. And those two things, like I looked for a long time, and I talk about that a lot in my speeches, and sort of found that intersection where I can write and storytell and find this creative space and do it in a way where other people go, thank you. Like, I can use something there to improve X, Y, or Z. And so that just makes me feel good. It's cool.
How many, I mean, you have to be impacting now with your audience and your reach. It seems like hundreds of thousands, millions of people. These people write to you, they reach out, they repost your stuff on their story. Like, is that overwhelming? Do you feel like some sense of pressure now to like constantly produce because you are who you are now?
You know what? I've never felt pressure. It's the opposite. It's love. Like, there's this thing where, and I think everyone understands this, because to be successful, you have to pay attention to the metrics and the numbers and make sure that what you're doing is adding value and growing. But I think you can become so locked in on that it can detach you from the reality. And so when people do reach out and say how it helped or how it was impactful, or, you know, even a, hey, me too, I appreciate you walking through this with me. It's really a beautiful thing. And it's like, it reminds me why I do it. You know, that's the best way to put it.
It's amazing. There's so many great messages in your content for those who don't know what you do. I mean, the best way for me to describe it, and then I'd love for you to describe it further, but it's basically uplifting and motivational content, all of which are written and delivered and produced by you, which is amazing. And, you know, I think the context in which you might listen to this could be anything. It could be, I'm having a really rough day and I need a lift. I'm going to turn this on. It could be, I'm at the gym and I want to get psyched up. I'm going to turn it on. It could be I'm having a drag at my job and I, like, are you targeting a specific type of audience, or are you really targeting the world who needs to hear this message?
That's what's cool, because I know it goes against a lot of philosophy on that, but just sort of broad, just kind of calling shots as I see them. Like, what's always amazed me is how all it takes is to hear something one way, different than you've ever heard it before, and your life can completely change. And we are not practical creatures. We're not pragmatic. We're emotional. And I think one of the reasons that, I can say I personally love doing it, and somewhat speculation, but I, have data that I think emphasizes this, that other people enjoy it as well, is because there is that emotional piece to it. Like, coming from a music background, sometimes it's not what you say. Sometimes it's how you say it. It's making someone feel something. Like, you can explain to someone, here's what you're doing wrong, and there are 10 things that I think would improve your situation. Here are the 5 steps that personally changed my life when I was stuck. Or you can tell a story that highlights a light bulb moment and what you were going through and how you found a solution, even when you thought you wouldn't. Those feelings where it's like the world's collapsing down around you, but there was one thing that carried you through to the next moment. There was one thing that got you there. And like, if you can present that in a way that is relatable, I feel like, again, when we talk about context, like, we all have those situations where we forget that there is a solution, and there is a solution in an arm's reach. And so it's just remembering that and understanding, hey, forget about the steps and the being practical. Like, find that one thing. It's there. Believe in yourself. And that's all it takes sometimes, that light bulb moment to sort of initiate the snowball going down the hill.
Speaking of storytelling, you're going to tell a couple of stories today, I'm sure, as we go through our podcast. One that is really interesting to me, and that I think has been really valuable for your audience, is a story about a young lady who felt a deep sense of fear. I think that the root of all sort of bad decisions stems from a place of fear. When we make a poor decision in life, I think it's always because we had some kind of fear that's typically irrational.
Yeah.
Built up, and it leads to all kinds of negative outcomes. And sometimes when we just face those things head on, it's always better when we face them head on. So I'd love for you to share a story about, how one might face their fears.
Yeah. It's that anecdote. Usually it's what we don't do that hurts us. It's fear of what could happen that keeps us where we are. So yeah, the story you're alluding to, it was an open mic night in Delray, and I was sitting in the front row, pretty close to the front, for like a slam poetry contest, and people were basically going up there doing 2 poems and calling it a night. And there were all these different, levels of skill. Some people were newer, some people had been there forever. And there was this one girl towards the end that they call her name. She walks up. And one of the first things she says is, this is the first time I've ever done this. I'm going to read my poems, and I'm excited to be here with you. And, because I'm so close, I'm getting like the visual, and I see her pull out her phone. She's got her poems on her notes app, and she's reading her poem into the mic, and, audibly it sounds fine. Like, you couldn't tell that she was scared, but I'm looking at her hand and it's trembling. It's trembling right in front of me. And it was so emotionally touching to me, because, personally, it brought me back to those situations, like those times where it's like you so deeply, biologically, every instinct says no, but for some reason you force yourself to. and it ends up making all the difference, right? And I'm thinking about this girl and how she didn't have to be there. There's no gun to her head. She could have been home watching Netflix. She could have been doing anything in the world, but she willed herself to be there and with, shaky hands get through these 2 poems for her. And she'll leave that knowing forever that she can do the difficult thing, that it doesn't kill you, that it makes you stronger, and it'll evolve into the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. And something about that was like so powerful to me. It was like the beginning of something for her, and it was cool. And the idea is like, that's, to me, that is a microcosm of life. Like, life comes down to what you do with shaky hands, not when you want to or things are easy, but like when the lizard brain is saying sit down and you stand up.
It's amazing. Have you heard the analogy of the buffalo and the cows?
I have. Yeah, that was, where were you? You told me that at one point. I forget where, but it's, you want me to go down that road?
Yeah, I'd love for you to hear. I'd love for you to share it.
Yeah. So this is, stolen from my friend Tyler Hall. The idea is, if there's a storm and there's buffalo and cows in a field, as the storm's approaching, what the buffalo will do is they'll run into the storm, which, they get that interaction, that chaos sooner, but they're out of the storm sooner. And what the cows will do, on the other hand, is try and evade the storm. So they'll run away from it and ultimately end up running with it. Therefore being in the storm longer. So it's a very similar theme, run into the chaos, embrace it. And you find yourself in that, those precious clear blue skies sooner.
What sort of advice? I mean, maybe that's the advice, right? Maybe the advice to people that are feeling fearful about doing a thing, it's just face it head on and do it. But I don't know that that's the only advice that somebody might lean on to get through their fears and their trials. Like, what sort of advice would you give people who are struggling and seemingly there's a storm on the horizon? Like, how did they get through it?
You know what's interesting? I recently had, at least on a surface level, a change of heart here, because what I would do is sort of categorize it. And like, when you get nervous, ask yourself, look, am I nervous because I'm just nervous, but I still want to do it? Or am I nervous because this doesn't align with who I am? And maybe, hey, there's a reason I feel this way and I should pivot or, deviate from the plan. I was actually with Evan, and he said, I get it, but when you do that and when you create nuance, you give yourself an opportunity to talk yourself out of it. In other words, if you leave the door cracked, you'll kick it open. So if there's some curiosity or something that you're scared to do, but you're being pulled in that direction, go there. And, I sat on it for a long time, and I think that's right. And I think it's right because most decisions are reversible. That's just the reality. Like, there are very few things that are forever that you can't come back from. And I'd much rather be, preconditioned to say yes and be the buffalo and move into the storm. And then if you have to backtrack, do it. And by the way, life gave you a little wisdom in your pocket too for the next go around, than someone who sat there and thought and contemplated.
Yeah. I think one theme that I really love that you talk about a lot is our ego. And I think if you ask 10 people, what is an ego, you're going to get 10 different answers. What is an ego to you, and why is that topic so important to you in your content and the message you share with the world?
Yeah, it's a lot of people think that our battles are us versus the world. But what I've found consistently is that it's us versus ourselves. It's me versus me, and me getting in my own head and worried about my own reputation or trying to be this or that, versus, doing what's going to add the most value. You look at all these obstacles that I talk about, like perfectionism is a great example. Holding on, like releasing something because it's not perfect. It's not perfect yet. And I'm a perfectionist, and I only release something when it's perfect, and soon it will be, but it's not yet. And it's like, no, what that is being scared of judgment. Like, that's all it is. You're scared. It's a derivative of fear. You're nervous. And, you can look at a million other instances. Like, most of the time when you take off the mask, when you pull back the curtain, it is our ego. It's scared of judgment. It's concern for what other people will think about you. And it's funny, like, as I've grown and I've been very public in my speeches, a lot of it's what I write about is my battle with these situations and overcoming them. But as you grow, the opportunity increases, the world around you changes, and there's always a next thing, right? It's always like that. That's why I talk about imposter syndrome being a thing of value, because in a way it says, hey, you're somewhere you weren't, and it feels new and it feels uncomfortable, but it should. Your ego should be kicking and screaming. You should be in a position where you are doing something new and learning, because the opposite of that, it's like that another, I think it was attributed to Aristotle, but it's like Lincoln, everything is. The only way to avoid criticism is do nothing, say nothing. So yeah, I mean, and we talked about the first day we met, right, at that dinner was, that was the perfect example of that.
You want to share more about that? More about the time that we first met?
Yeah, so we met at a dinner in Phoenix with some really awesome people, and that was I was with Evan, Carmichael, and didn't really know anyone else. And met Tyler at the dinner.
Lee Benson's house.
Yep. Ali was there. There were some awesome folks there. And very accomplished people. And I remember sitting there thinking two things. One, this is so cool. How lucky you are to be here. How far you've come. Like, to even be in a situation where you're casually having dinner and talking with these folks. It's a testament to what you've overcome over the last decade. And then there was the part of me that was like, but also don't fuck it up. Like, don't, I was very like in my head, and it was new. Like, it was fine. In a way, like, every new situation has its different circumstances, and but I ended up writing a speech about that that feeling in that situation, because we had dinner afterwards and we were chatting about it, and you were like, "Yeah, I noticed you were quiet." If you're at the table, be at the table. And that really resonated. I found a ton of value in that. Because that situation, again, as you're growing, the table metaphorically is going to grow. And if you don't feel like you deserve to be at that table or sitting down there, maybe deserves not even too strong. If you don't feel like you have something to contribute or value to add, you'll be missing out on something that's beautiful, that's going to really elevate you and your life and everything you're doing. And so that's a mindset thing. That's a mental switch that, like, as you are finding yourself in new places, immerse yourself in those new places, belong in those new places. You're not an outsider looking in. You're your own fresh perspective and experiences and stories, and you can make the people around you better. And it was really right place, right time. Like, hearing that was incredibly valuable for me.
I remember wishing that you would have shared more, right? Because there was a lot of wisdom shared at that table. And like, you are feeling like an imposter in many ways sitting at that table. But meanwhile, when you and I talk about creating content, I feel like I feel totally inferior. Like, dude, I have no idea what I'm doing, and I'm confused and I'm lost. Right. So, I think to your point, once you get in the room, there's a reason you're in the room, and being willing and able to open up and to share and to add value to the conversation for what you bring, which is different than what I bring, and it's different than what Ollie and Evan and I think is important.
Yeah, and that's just it, right? You can always, in any situation, find a reason if you look for it why you shouldn't be there or why you are inadequate in some way.
Yeah.
If you look for it, but you can always find the inverse of that as well. And that's another thing. Like we were talking about perspective shifts, just having that in your back pocket. It's like understanding that is so valuable. Wherever you are, there is something you can add that will make the room better. That's a powerful thing.
After we had our dinner, we went back to my office, and you brought your nice camera, you brought your mics.
Yep.
And we recorded a speech that I'm working on about my journey and sort of the rise of this entrepreneur, the exit, nearly losing my wife, and then really how that experience changed me and what I learned from it. And when we recorded that, I think my speech was 16 or 18 minutes, if I recall. And after that, Eddie went home and he took that speech and he wrote a new speech that was 6 minutes. So it was a fraction, maybe a third of the length. And when you sent that to me, it was one of the most emotional experiences I've had, certainly since I almost lost my wife, listening to that speech. Because it was this weird out of body where I was hearing my story, but it wasn't my voice. I wasn't saying it. But it was like my story, and it was near and dear to my heart, and it was well polished, and it was striking the right chords, and it was only talking about the things that were sort of pertinent and relevant. No filler space, no extra anything. Straight to the point. And, that's been at some point, I think that speech will be released somewhere on your platform, on my platform. It'll be shared with the world, but it's been very private so far. I haven't shared it with anybody except my wife, obviously. And when we listened to that together, so I remember I listened to it myself the first time. And then that night I went home and we played it together, and we literally just held each other and cried for seemed like 20 minutes during the whole speech, after. It was a very, very cool experience that changed my life. So I'm really grateful that you did that.
I'm happy to. And it's a beautiful story. That was first time I heard that was at the table, at dinner. But yeah, it really, really reminds you what matters. So I was happy to do that.
There's this thing that I think about often, which is specifically given that I went from building a software company to now building a brand and trying to influence and impact as many people as I can with my message. And a lot of times it's not clear. Most of the time it's not clear what's on the other side of this, and it's not obvious what the reward is.
What do you mean, other side of this?
It's unclear whether or not this is going to succeed or fail. The only thing I can do is every day continue to push through, move the needle, just pressing through when things are not obvious, right? A lot of your messages around that, what are some of your thoughts around just the constant day-to-day wake up, put on my boots, go to work, be consistent, and trust the process?
Yeah. So, well, first, before I forget this thought, I think with what you're doing and where you've come from, this only fails if you stop. And I know that's almost a cliche, but when you look at the fundamentals, what you've built and what you've endured to do something, to do the thing that you did, right? That a very, very low percentage of people have done and a very, very high percentage of people want to do. You have the stories and insights that are coveted, that the world needs. So to me, like, I don't see it as failure. Like, maybe I'll miss this jump shot. It's like, you have the ability and you have the knowledge. So like, to me, it's a continuation thing. It's a longevity thing. Like, I think there's a 0% chance you fail. Because I know you, and I know that you won't stop going down that direction, and you'll pivot and tweak and adjust. So yeah, and that's you know, on a higher level. Like, I remember learning that. It's almost like, you know, I talk about my experience in terms of decades, because this last decade has been entrepreneurial. Before that, it really wasn't. It was adhering to a set of standards, staying in, you know, the lines that were drawn for me, getting good grades, to get a good job, to get promoted, to do those things. And then I learned, like, oh my God, you can step outside this box. Yeah. And so one of those moments was I did my TED Talk on this. It's a speech called Running in the Rain. And something I'd do before my office job is every day I'd go on a run. I lived in Boston at the time, and would just do a run around the Charles River, come in, get dressed, and go to work. And so one morning I got up, and it was like this, like, slushy, frozen sleet coming. It's just awful, right? So I'm like standing in the doorway looking out at this stuff. And my thought process, my rational brain was like, this is not a big deal, and there's no reason to go through that. So go run at lunch, go do something different. But for one reason or another, and I say that because I truly, like, it wasn't like, I'm going to be brave today. It was like, just go, just do it. And I grabbed, you know, a windbreaker, a beanie, some running gloves, and was just off. And it was uncomfortable. It sucked for like 20 minutes, but then your body warms up and you acclimate. And I went around the, you know, the Charles River, and I came back. And when you talk about persistence, you talk about, you know, the difference between failing or not failing. Like, standing in my living room, I felt incredible. I don't think I'd felt that way before. And it seems trivial, and I get that, because there are no like awards or anything handed out, but I did something hard that I knew that 99.9% of the world would look out the window and go, nah. You know, and there's something to that. And it was like, maybe this is it. Like, maybe that is the secret sauce. And that was, by the way, right before I left that job, and right before I started sort of that creative entrepreneurial journey that I'm still on. If you can, and I'm not even talking the insanely painful things, but the slightly uncomfortable things. If you learn to see yourself as the person that goes, I'm going to do it anyway. This is kind of uncomfortable, but I'm going to do it anyway. When most people wouldn't, I'll be the guy or the gal, right? That compounds over time to really change your life. You know, there's a saying, people follow through on who they believe themselves to be. And I believe wholeheartedly that's the truth. And when you see yourself as the person that does the hard thing, you know, nothing's going to stop you.
How many people have listened to that Running in the Rain speech now?
I'm not sure the exact number, a couple million.
That's pretty wild to think about, right?
Yeah. Yeah, the scalability.
Can you imagine what like a soccer or football, you know, stadium would look like with a few million people in it?
Isn't that funny to think about? Like, Fenway Park has like 37,000 seats.
Right. So take like 20 of those or so. That's how many people have heard that speech.
I know, it's unbelievable. That's what I mean, like, with the numbers versus reality. Like, our perception gets so, even imagine 5 people sitting right here listening to us.
Yeah.
Like, in the room, how different that would feel. That's amazing, right? So like, yeah, the digital space has like skewed our understanding of impact. I really think it has.
Yeah, totally. Speaking of that, I'd love to, you know, for people that are out there thinking about creating a brand, a personal brand, you know, I think it's, I don't think people understand or realize what's truly required to do what you do. And I didn't until you told me about your sort of daily schedule and your weekly like cadence of how you do things. I'd love for you to break down, like this is maybe like a nice insider view into a very successful influencer or creator.
Yeah.
Like break down a week in your life.
Yeah. So now there are certain pillars that I call them like creative pillars that I do not move. And so those are like the 3 speeches I write every week, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, which is I'm taking a thought or an idea or maybe expounding upon a quote from a song, a line from a book, something that resonated with me. And so those mornings I'm getting up and I'm writing that. And the reason I do that in the morning is because like with creative stuff, in my experience, as the day goes on, as more variables are entered, it's very easy to push that stuff out. It's like in the morning, it's quiet. No one's there. And you just do your thing. So yeah, the AM is for that type of thing. Working out, usually in the morning, like I fluctuate with that as well. But I feel like if I had to sum it up, it's like being very consistent with the things that need to happen. So whether it's long form content or taking my long form messages and breaking it into bite-sized things and having time to do those, like understanding what the non-negotiables are, the things that are really going to move the needle, the 20%. And then as the day sort of moves into the afternoon, like, and we get tired and start to, that's when I do some of the more, what's the word for it? The like administrative stuff, the calls, maybe going live on Instagram, stuff that's fun for me, but it's like, it's not, if it weren't there, the business would stop turning. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
What do you say to people who have a lack of purpose or motivation in life?
You haven't found the thing. I think there's this idea that not all who wander are lost, right? Everyone's afraid to wander. Everyone's afraid to not know. And I felt it, but one of my favorite stories to tell is being downtown Boston with 2 of my buddies, like very successful guys. And we were talking to these girls. We're all single, right? What's the first thing they ask? What do you do? Right?
You're like,
Goldman Sachs, work for a senator. I'm like, I got a great idea for a YouTube channel. They're like, later, dude.
Yeah.
It hurts the ego. Like so much of it, going back to that question, is just pride. Like, can you be the person that doesn't know? Can you be the person that's has skin in the game? And if it's easy to say, yeah, I could, right? But then like, be the 25-year-old in his boxers writing a speech for an audience of 7.
Yeah.
Your grandma's commenting under the thing. Like, and I could go on and on and on, but it's like, you have to be willing to sort of trudge through that.
Yeah.
And that's, in your world, there was nothing certain, right? When you were building that company, nothing, you could have easily come crashing down.
Totally.
But that's the price you pay, the cost of admission.
How many speeches do you figure you've written?
Close to 1,000. Yeah, a lot.
That is wild.
Yeah.
Most of them ones that you then ultimately gave and produced and
right. Yeah.
Some for other people.
I don't do many client stuff, but less than 100 for clients, but somewhere up there.
What's like a list of topics? Like just rattle off some of the topics that you talk about on your channel.
I like talking about mindset. I like drawing parallels from running specifically, because I could do that all day, between what we endure as athletes and what we endure in the trenches of life, and how understanding how to win in one place correlates to winning in another. It's a very big thing. I like talking about just navigating some of these tough times and like different ways to turn adverse situations into positivity. And that's probably the best way I can put it. Like most of the things that will change our lives, we walk right by, like we're waiting for them and waiting for them and waiting, but they're there. And it's just, will you come face to face with that awareness? Will you manufacture that momentum in your life? And so, my stories are about times where I did just that, where I met someone who helped me see something differently that sent me down an entirely different path. Like that, I think that to me is so amazing how the slightest tweak can just have exponential. Like one of my buddies, he was a shot putter in high school, and he said he knew what he was doing wrong, and I don't remember that exact thing, so I'm not going to try. But he was like, there was some technique issue that coach after coach after coach after coach was like, you need to fix it, you need to fix it, you need to fix it. And then one of his coaches said, hey, change it this way, or gave some metaphor that was like light bulb moment, right? And he heard it in a way that resonated, and it, transformed his shot put. So like, yeah, that's what it is. Different context. And what's cool is it's taught me to be aware. It's taught me to always have my eyes open. When you do it for a living, when you're asking yourself like, what's the value in this? Because I'm going to put it in Evernote. It's like you really start to grab things and pull them into your orbit. And so for me, I love it and it's helpful. So yeah, but I think everyone can do the same. Like be a little bit more attentive, eyes open. This didn't go well. Why? Okay, well, what can I turn it into? There's power there.
So you've written 1,000 speeches or more, and you've talked about a wide array of things. And, you and I, one of the things that we do is quite frequently we'll exchange audio messages. And every once in a while you'll say something that totally resonates with me, and it like changes my day or my week. And at least one time I've done that for you.
Oh, you have.
Which the one that I'm referencing is a time that I said something to the effect of, could you imagine what life would be like if you were to apply everything that you know to be true and everything you've ever written about, everything you've ever talked about, right? Because you're encouraging and motivating and counseling and advising people to do certain things and act a certain way to have a better life.
Yeah.
And if you actually did them all, like, what would this life be like?
Yeah.
Why did that have an impact on you?
Because it is the overarching question, right? As someone that loves to like philosophize on life, and everyone knows what's right, but it's the lifelong battle of implementation. And, when I hear a question like that really makes me think, that sends a chill down my spine, I put it in the context of my present moment. Always. Like, what are the obstacles I'm facing right now? And it was a reminder, like, what the right thing to do is. One, because you've experienced it in different contexts before. You've read about it, you talk about it. Like, what does it look like here? And I just thought that was a super powerful thing. Like, how can we implement? There's the thinking versus the doing, right? So my thing right now is, as my platform's compounded and grown, I now have resources that I didn't 5 years ago. And so for me, like, it's exciting, but it's you're moving from the creator to, in some capacity, a business owner. And there are things that need to change and need to be outsourced and adjusted for scale, and all these things that are super exciting, but like, you pull back the curtain, there's hesitancy. And so it was beautiful for me in terms of the thinking versus doing. The thinker sits and ponders, and the doer goes. And falls on his face, but he gets up and now has the wisdom to take another step forward. Whereas like when we were talking and you were like, I'm going to do the content creation thing. You're like, do you think I should, hire someone individually? Should I try a firm? Like, what are your thoughts? And we talked about that for a little bit. At the end of the day, you're like, okay, hired X, Y, and Z. This is going out tomorrow. This is the plan. And I'm like, this dude does not waste time. Like this is, it's go, go, go. And that's a perfect example.
Yeah.
We all know, but we got to remind ourselves to do.
That is a great example. And it's helpful when you have you have a bit of a framework for the doing, right? Like you and I sat down and I committed to you, like, okay, cool. I'm going to record 10 videos this week. And then I'm going to do 10 more next week and 10 more the following week. And I'm going to do that for 4 weeks and we're going to see how it goes. And like we put a strategy together, we're doing it, it's being executed, and now it's fun to see like come to life, right? But on the same token, I've put a lot of time and a lot of energy and even money into this new platform, and it is very new, very new. But also, entrepreneurs are not patient people.
Right.
We tend to not be very patient. So I see it and I've got 60 followers or something on my new channel, and I'm just going, does nobody care? Right. And so, what do you say to people which a lot of the people listening to the show are either currently founders, entrepreneurs, or soon to be, right? How do you just put your head down and say, okay, I have enough of a framework to understand what I need to do. Now it comes down to just like I saw this photo, which was like bad entrepreneurs, and it was like, a couple of check boxes, and then good ones, like they'll do it for a week, and then great ones here, and then like exceptional, the 0.01% will do the thing for years. Yeah. They'll produce 100 episodes of a podcast. They'll produce 1,000 pieces of content, whatever. And then they have this tipping point and then things work. But like most people listening will never get there. How do you get there? How do you make sure you just stay focused on?
I think you're patient with the end goal, but ferocious in the day-to-day, in the adjustment, in the pivoting. Like you have to be aware of what's working and what's not working, but understanding that it is it's a long journey. If you look at, for example, YouTube, right, that's pertinent. So started out with 3-minute speeches, right? And they did well on the platform for a little bit, and then the platform changes. It's always evolving. And I've tried so many things. I have little mini documentaries on there. I have, where I have silent films. I have 3-hour-long speeches. I have 1-hour-long speeches. I have music videos where I have a guitar. I'm doing spoken word poetry. I threw so much stuff at the wall, right? And I can categorize that stuff into, hey, this was fun. I enjoyed it. No one cares, right? That's a hobby. That video is a hobby, right? There's one where I'm running around in a panda suit singing. No one cares, right? That's it. But
it's a hobby.
I enjoyed that. I enjoyed the hell out of that day. Wouldn't change it for the world. But like, you have to do that. And so to me, it is being attentive, and curious and creative, and picking up these little pieces and continually rebuilding. But understanding it's going to take a long time. Like it'll compound, but there has to be a level of patience there. So yeah, it's like the two things can be true at once.
What's any final just nugget bomb piece of advice you want to share with the audience before we wrap?
Yeah. One of my favorites, this is hands down one of the quotes that impacted me the most. Nietzsche: those who were seen dancing were thought to be insane by those who could not hear the music. Because I know a lot of entrepreneurs and I know a lot of creatives, to your exact point, do get impatient. And it's hard to feel confident about something that's not there. And no one puts their arm around you and says, hey, that idea is so awesome. Like, it's definitely, like, no one knows. No one cares. Everyone's living their own life. And so to understand that it's not crazy to see something that isn't there. It is how things are made and brought to life. And so take pride in the fact that you are a maker and a doer, and bringing it to life, making it happen.
Amen, brother. Good to have you on the podcast. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you, man.